Welcome to the show that's just a bit outside your normal show. That's Jay Kaplan, Joe Tufaro, and Anthony Strait. And my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Welcome to the Divisional Round and CFP Championship. It's the On the Sports Lines preview show for those things. Tonight, the final eight in the NFL is being talked about with the divisionals, and the final two in college football with the championship. That makes this a 10-team show, and I want to make sure you know, that it is punishable by law if we talk about an 11th team. So first, let's go to the pros of the grade A. We start with the AFC's final familiar four. These are the same four teams that made the divisionals a year ago, just with different dance partners. And now we have this dance again for AFC Championship invitations. First up, we have the Chiefs and the Texans. These two teams played just 28 days ago in KC, where the home team won 27-19. Now they meet again in the playoffs, and it's the third time this decade that they've done so. What a weird combination of players. Jay, when the Chiefs beat the Steelers on Christmas, Patrick Mahomes got rest as baby number 3 was born in his household, getting a little bit of silver to go with his platinum and gold. Actually, I think it's the other way around. I don't know. And now, after 24 days, he's back on the field along with some of the great googly boogly chefs who have had that same amount of rest. Jay, the Chiefs will win here if.
Yeah, they can keep Mahomes upright against the Texans' pressure so he and his receivers can make plays. I mean, we all saw what the Texans defense did to Justin Herbert last week, led by edge rushers Will Anderson Jr. and Daniel Hunter, both of whom were above 25% in ESPN's pass rush win rate. For a defense that's number one in that category, the defense registered 4 sacks against a quarterback who was only sacked 41 times all season. And their secondary, led by cornerbacks Derek Stingley Jr., 2 picks, 1 forced fumble, 5 passes defense, and Kamari Lassiter, 1 pick, and he didn't allow a single reception when he was the nearest defender to a receiver per NFL Next Gen stats. They completely shut down the Chargers receivers in coverage, forcing Herbert into his second highest bad throw percentage of the season, 21.9, and 4 picks, including a pick 6 from safety Eric Murray. This is a guy who threw 3 picks all season long. Herbert, arguably his worst game of the season, 14 of 32, 43.8% completion, 242 yards, 1 TD against those 4 picks. His 40.9 passer rating is the lowest he's ever had in a game in his career, and a big reason the Chargers went 3 of 11 on third down. Thus, the big question, and therefore the big key for the Chiefs, is can Patrick Mahomes avoid becoming the latest top-flight quarterback who has laid an egg against the Texans? Held Josh Allen to his worst completion percentage ever, 30% in Week 5. Picked Jared Goff off 5 times in Week 10. Forced Tua Tagovailoa into 4 turnovers, 3 picks, and 1 fumble in Week 15. Now, it starts with the Chiefs, who are number 8 overall in pass block win rate as a team per ESPN, being able to keep Hunter and Anderson Jr. away from Mahomes to allow him and his receivers time to connect and make plays. Now, they've had their issues with left tackle all season, but the insertion of first-team All-Pro left guard Joe Thuney, number 1 in the NFL among interior O-linemen with a 98 pass block win rate, as Mahomes' blindside protector late in the season, has stabilized things somewhat, though former Pro Bowl tackle DJ Humphries, who struggled this season even before he had to deal with a hamstring injury and did not look good in his return in the regular season finale against Denver, could return to his usual left tackle spot, which would kick Thuney back inside. Now, if Humphries just needed to knock off the rust, then the Chiefs' left side would be in good shape, leaving right tackle Jawan Taylor, who is tied for the second most penalties by an O-lineman in the NFL this year, as the potential weak link and target for the Texans' pass rush, though he was in the top 20 in pass block win rate at 92%. Now, if the protection holds, KC's allowed Mahomes to be sacked just 36 times this season, then it becomes about how Mahomes and company attack the secondary. Now, we spilled plenty of digital ink on this show talking about how Mahomes hasn't put up the kind of numbers we're used to seeing from him this season. But we all know the playoff Pat is a horse of a different color. 15-3 in the playoffs overall, riding a 7-game winning streak. 41 postseason passing TDs, 5th most all time. 67.9% completion percentage, 2nd highest in NFL history. In the divisional round alone, he is 6-0, most wins without a loss in any playoff round in NFL history. 16 total touchdowns, 0 turnovers. Kansas City has 14 as a team this season, fourth fewest in the NFL, and 11 of those are Mahomes' picks, but he hasn't thrown one since the Week 11 loss to Buffalo. And since that game, he has been a little more like his usual self, completing 64.6% of his passes, 1,524 yards, that's 254 a game, 11 scores, 98.1 passer rating. Chiefs are undefeated, 6-0. None of that bodes well for the Texans secondary that allowed Mahomes to throw for 260 yards and a TD while running up 33 yards on the ground and a touchdown on a bad ankle in Week 15. And the reason I stress this is because the Houston Texans secondary prides itself on forcing turnovers. In that game, Houston played man coverage at the highest rate they've played all season, hoping that their secondary could blanket the Chiefs pass catchers long enough for their pass rush to get home. It did not work, but I wouldn't be surprised if they tried it again, as it plays to the strength of their defense. Now, Andy Reid's game plan in Week 16, along with his usual use of the quick passing game to keep the rush at bay, was to use plays that made it hard for Houston to bump Kansas City's receivers. Now, rookie Xavier Worthy was the main beneficiary, 7 catches on 11 targets, 65 yards and a touchdown, working primarily against slot cornerback Miles Bryant. That's a matchup I expect them to go hard at in this game. The reason they were able to take advantage of it is because Stingley Jr. and Lassiter were occupied by a fully healthy Marquise Brown and veteran DeAndre Hopkins. Now, another schematic theme I'll be looking for from Kansas City is if they increase their use of play action with Mahomes under center. They didn't use it too much in Week 16, but Houston's linebackers, who are focused on getting downhill to blow up plays in the running game, can be induced to bite on run fakes, which should create play action pass opportunities, especially in the middle of the field, in the areas vacated by those linebackers. Particularly for Hopkins, who is among the best in the business at working those areas, as well as the Chiefs' tight ends, which leads me to my final point. The X factor, and yes, he usually does qualify as that now that the Chiefs have a fully stocked wide receiver room, is tight end Travis Kelce, who routinely ramps up his game in the playoffs, regardless of a down year in the regular season, which he's now had for the second year in a row. Just 823 yards on his 97 catches. That's just 8.5 yards a catch, and only hit the end zone 3 times this season. Now, if playoff Travis shows up the same way that playoff Pat does, his 165 catches the most in playoff history. His 1,903 yards and 19 touchdowns are second only to Hall of Famer Jerry Rice. And then the 17 times he's connected with Mahomes for a touchdown is the most by any duo in NFL playoff history. If they both show up that way, and the scheme I just laid out holds true, then Kansas City's passing attack should be able to make enough plays to get the Chiefs back to their 7th straight AFC title game.
Ironically enough, their second best receiver in that game, Week 16, was Samaje Perine, who is probably not going to make too much of a factor, although Travis Kelce is still probably getting the most targets out of anyone in that game, even if that is a fully stocked wide receiver room. And I don't know if you can ever consider a team, the Chiefs, having a fully stocked wide receiver room since Tyreek Hill left. Although
damn sight better than it looked at the beginning of the season, that's for sure.
For now. Anthony, since that game that we mentioned with the Chiefs in Week 16, they won their divisional round game against the Chargers 32-12. That was the scoregami. They also lost to the Ravens on Christmas 31-2. Ironically enough, not a scoregami. Who knew? Anthony, the Jekyll and Hyde Texans will pull off a big upset here
if they don't want Georgia or have any more jokes about needing a match to find the end zone, their offense going to have to carry the load. I mean, that's pretty obvious. We know they have a defense. In fact, guys actually talking about the defense because we've been cross-talking. Me and Jay and I have been cross-talking each other. But the offense really is a bit of an issue. Despite we had injuries to the wide receiver core, Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell to be as a shining example. Tank Dell actually got hurt in that game against Kansas City a month ago. Offensive line issues, execution, and even questionable play call. And the result is an offense that's 19th in scoring, 26th in offense and an offensive defensive adjusted value over average during the regular season. And against the Chargers, yes, they had 32 points. They even racked up 429 total yards of offense, but they took the ball over 3 times and had a hard time moving the ball through the first half of that football game. Really, the defense and the special teams is really broke that game open in the Texans' favor. In a rematch from a month ago against the Chiefs, they're going to have to get to get out to a fast start with the passing game and get CJ Stroud into some kind of rhythm. As good as the Chiefs defense has been against and rushing the passer, they're actually just 18th in total pass defense, giving up just over 218 yards a game, and 16th in passing expected points added. Kansas City also gives up it's the third worst as far as giving up passing yards in the first quarter, close to 60 passing yards a game, which actually helps the Texans, who is sixth in that category, averaging close to 60 passing yards per game. Offensively, the two main weapons for CJ Stroud has been Nico Collins, 7 catches for 122 in the game in the wild card win against the Chargers. He's really been the only consistent wide receiver that Chargers were able to go to, and it hasn't mattered because defensively, even the Chargers knew who to take away. It didn't matter. That just tell you how good of a player Nico Collins has been for C.J. Stroud and the Texans the last 2 years. But also Joe Mixon running for 100 yards and getting the Nickelodeon Player of the Game, by the way.
Which he angled for, by the way, the whole entire time. I think he's the first person to actually put in a campaign for the MVP.
Did you see him wear the slime hat on the sideline?
I did. He was banking for it. He got it.
Yeah, but also C.J. Stroud is going back to use his legs a little more. He had 42 yards on the ground against the Chargers, scrambling. But I also opened up some plays on the field for Collins in the passing game when Stroud is outside the pocket, and the Chiefs have struggled against mobile quarterbacks this season. So for the Texans, it's going to have to be the C.J. Stroud of last year. I think that was something I just spoke of last week, previewing the Texans Charger game. C.J. Stroud turning back the page to his rookie campaign, but also it's going to have the rest of the offense going to have to do their part. It may be wise to go out to a flying start and try to get a lead, and maybe test that Chiefs offensive line with the Texans' really good pass rush that really dominated the Chargers in the second half of the game last week. So that's what the Texans have to do. They have to come out to a fast start and just try to attack this Chiefs secondary as early as possible.
Yeah, and one thing, interestingly enough, Joe Mixon compared this team with the Texans to the team that he was on with Cincinnati 3 years ago. Same record, same winning the division and nobody believes in us hype. Could happen. I have a feel. I have another team that you can compare that to. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But now, guys, ring the bell. It's time for the main event. It's a matchup between the Bills and the Ravens. Each man at QB by Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who will surely be 1-2, 2-1, or even 1-1 in MVP voting. Sure, the Ravens won a matchup between the two back in week 4, 35-10. That was week 4. And Anthony, that was in Buffalo. Now the team who has only made it past this round once will try again. And the Ravens were the team 4 years ago that the Bills beat to get to the AFC finale. Anthony, crunch the numbers, break a table, and tell me that the Bills will win Sunday if what?
Well, before we move on, this portion of the show is sponsored by... I can't find it. To hell with it. Anyway... well, the Bills are going to win. It's going to have to be Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. I think that's the most obvious answer for the Bills. We saw what the magic of Josh Allen is, that touchdown throw to Ty Johnson on 4th and 1, just doing everything with his legs. We saw the magic against Kansas City on 4th and 1 and a chance to close out the game. He just basically wheels his way into the end zone. I mean, there's a reason why Josh Allen has become an MVP candidate, and rightfully so. He's done it all. He's done it with the arm. He's done it with the legs. He's done it behind an offensive line that's been really good. Only allowed a really good Broncos defense to get to him twice last week, and both of those was coverage sacks, which I think every quarterback takes from time to time when guys are not open. But he did not play well, as you mentioned, Rabbi, in week 4. He was just 16 of 29 for 180, no touchdowns. He was sacked 3 times. a strip sack by Calvin Noy that the Ravens were covering. It only ran for 21 yards when he got outside the pocket. The Ravens defense gotten much better over the course of the year. They only allowed 200 or fewer passing yards 8 of their last 9 regular season games. And also we saw the dominance they exhibited wild card weekend against the Steelers. Sorry, Jay. Last Saturday night. Josh Allen is gonna have to pretty much take over this game. He's gonna have to literally outperform the other MVP candidate on the other side of the field. And there's a reason why CBS put this in this prime late Sunday evening window. Well, the NFL did it, but it's a reason why it's a marquee matchup. But also, I think a little luck for Josh Allen is going to have to help as well. I mean, maybe some good luck charm from the Queen of Buffalo herself. Jay knows who I'm referencing. But yeah, it's good. Like, the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl aspirations, let alone getting out of this divisional weekend. And by the way, it is going to be freezing in 3 of these 4 wildcard games, FYI. But what did Mark Levy say? If it's too cold for them, it's just right for us. Hey, this is Buffalo Bills weather, but it's gonna. But again, it's gonna ride and die on the legs and shoulder of Josh Allen.
Calling Haley Steinfeld the Queen of Buffalo? She lives in Los Angeles, for God's sake. I know she is engaged to Josh Allen, but come on now.
There was a billboard outside of Ocean Park that is labeled her the Queen of Buffalo. And who am I to argue with Bill's Mafia? Okay, I don't want to be put through.
No, I would not argue with Bill's Mafia, and I would never argue against Kate Bishop. Never.
I was about to say, don't mess with Kate Bishop.
No, I won't. Again, Queen of Buffalo. Jay, the Ravens have won 7 in a row to get here, including avenging the last loss of that streak, doing it twice, technically, because everything in that series means double, apparently, beating the Steelers in the wild card round 28-14. The Ravens have scored less than 28 points only once in this win streak, and have only given up 20 points once in that same time frame. Time for the question, Jay. The Ravens will move on to Championship Sunday if?
They dominate time of possession with their running game. Now, behind running back Derrick Henry, who led the AFC with 1,921 yards rushing on 325 carries, 5.9 per carry, and tied James Cook and Jahmyr Gibbs for tops in the NFL with 16 rushing touchdowns, and quarterback Lamar Jackson, who set a career high with 915 rushing yards and led the NFL with 6.6 yards per carry. The Ravens led the NFL in total rushing yards with 3,189, rushing yards per game at 187.6, including 7 where they topped 200, and yards per carry at 5.8. They were 7-0 in those 200-plus rushing yard games, including 3 straight to close the regular season. They had only 1 game where they rushed for more than 175 yards and lost, and that was week 1 when they lost to Kansas City, despite rushing for 185 yards and averaging 5.8 a carry. That was also the only game they lost where they topped 175 rushing yards and had at least 30 minutes of time of possession. The Ravens had 11 games in the regular season where they topped 30 minutes in time of possession. They were 9-2 in those games. They took that game plan to a whole nother level in their 28-14 wildcard win over the Steelers, rushing for 299 yards, including 164 in the first half. They were at exactly 300 until Lamar Jackson took a knee to end the game. They averaged 6 yards a carry in that game, and they held the ball for a ridiculous 39 minutes and 33 seconds. Running back Derrick Henry led the way with 186 yards on 26 carries at 7.2 a pop and had 2 scores, 1 from 8, 1 from 44. His 4th career playoff game of 150-plus rushing yards, and Lamar Jackson added 81 on the ground on 15 carries. It's 5.4 a pop. They'll need to duplicate that if they're to beat the Bills on the road in Buffalo. Now, I know what all you casual fans are thinking. Jay, there's no way they can do that to the Bills. Au contraire, mon frere, they've already done it. In the Ravens' 35-10 Week 4 victory, they dominated the Bills, rushing for 271 yards, averaging 8 yards a carry with 2 touchdowns on the ground and holding the ball for 31 minutes and 3 seconds. Jackson from 9 yards out and Henry from 87 yards out each carried the rock across the goal line. Henry led the way, 199 yards rushing on 24 carries, 8.3 per carry. Jackson, 54 yards on the ground on 6 carries, 9 flat, as the Ravens' dynamic duo accounted for 253 of those 271 rushing yards. Now, stopping these two running the football en route to the Ravens' dominating time of possession is a tall order, one that very few teams have managed to do. Baltimore was held to under 150 yards rushing just 4 times this season. Coincidentally, all of them between weeks 8 and 11, including a season-low 99 against the Bengals in week 10. The other 3 games, they had 127 and 124 twice. They went 2-2 in those 4 games. They held the ball for less than 30 minutes in a game 6 times and went 3-3. They were held to less than 5 yards a carry in a game just 3 times. Ironically, they went 3-0. Jackson threw for 308, 269, and 290 in the air, averaging 12.4, 14.7, and 8.8 yards per attempt. That's kind of how you offset those rushing numbers. One of the reasons the Ravens have struggled in the playoffs in the Jackson era is due in large part for them getting away from who they are and what their offensive identity has been during their more successful regular seasons. They didn't do that in the wild card round. They came out pounding the rock, and they stayed with it for the entire game, dominating at the line of scrimmage. They had 5 drives of 9 plays or more, highlighted by a second quarter drive that covered 85 yards on 13 plays, all of them on the ground. They faced only 2 third down situations, both with 3rd and 1, and Henry's 8-yard TD capped the drive. The Ravens closed the game by holding the ball for 12 minutes and 22 seconds in the 4th quarter, including a 6+ minute drive that ended the game with that Jackson knee. Think about this. When the Ravens acquired Henry, they adjusted their offense to have Jackson under center more because Henry has historically been most effective that way. And yet, to counter what the Steelers did in holding Henry to just 65 yards on 13 carries in the Week 11 loss, offensive coordinator Todd Monken made the adjustment to spread the Steelers' defense out by running Henry more often out of shotgun, which gives Jackson the option to keep the ball and forces defenses to account for both him and Henry in the run game. And that's a numbers advantage for Baltimore. It worked to perfection. Henry ran for 162 yards on 24 carries, 6.8 a pop, with 113 of those yards coming out of shotgun. It's the most rushing yards he's ever had running out of shotgun, as Baltimore won 34-17. This version of the Baltimore Ravens, using Henry as the focal point of their punishing ground game, taking the pressure off of Jackson, allowing him to create plays with both his arm and his legs, will make them a very tough out in these AFC playoffs. Steelers safety Deshaun Elliott, a former Raven, said it best after the wildcard game, quote, having 300 yards rushing on you is worse than 300 yards passing. Buffalo Bills defense has their work cut out for them, guys.
You know, for all the accolades that we've given Saquon Barkley this year, 2,005 yards, number 8 all time in terms of rushing, and essentially what was only missing 1 game. Derrick Henry had the 11th best rushing season of all time when you look down at it with 1,921 yards. Only 10 players did what Derrick Henry did this season, and he's 31 now. So incredible the way he's done. Hey, Joe, let's start talking. Hey. Let's move to the other side of the bracket, and only one repeat team from last year's Final Four resides here. But we do have the 2021 and 2022 seasons reigning NFC champions in this bracket part. We'll talk about that in game 2. But first, the other game features those dominant NFL stalwarts, the Lions and the Commanders. One team just won their first playoff game since 1991, a year ago. That's the 1-seat Lions. And one team just won their first playoff game since 2006, just last week, and that's the Commies. Joe, the Lions have had a franchise record of wins this season.
Please don't ever call them that again.
I will call it that every single time. Oh, Joe, the Lions have had a franchise record in wins this season, going 15-2, and they are looking to cure the heartbreak that they had last year in the NFC Championship game. So let's see if the Lions can restore the roar starting this Saturday. Detroit will beat Washington if
they get the running game going early and they continue to just feed it like they did a couple of weeks ago against Minnesota. They need to get Gibbs going. I'm not sure if Montgomery's going to come back for this game. He is. Okay. Yes. So now you have your 2-headed monster back. You have the change up. You have a few more places you can put guys. You can put them both out on the field at the same time. Washington's run defense has been awful this year, and that's exactly what they need to take advantage of. So you set up Goff for success by running the ball, running the ball, running the ball, bring guys down. We all know the story. Bring the linebackers down and then get to throw it over the top, or get Amon St. Brown coming across the middle once you clear it out. Get that lovely tight end that Minnesota decided to trade to them for some unknown reason a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And just keep going from there. And I just think that again, their offense, you and I talked about this the other day. Their offense has been so dominant this year, Detroit. They seem to be able to put 30 points, 35 points up on anybody. Everybody thought the Minnesota game was going to be a fight for their life. I had talked to a lot of people from the Midwest that week, and they all thought Minnesota was going to walk in there and take care of a damaged Detroit team. And the good thing about that coaching staff is they're not just, let's go for it on fourth down. They do have plans, and they do figure things out, and they know how to play games, and they know how to scheme for different teams. So I don't see this as, again, anything can happen with a rookie quarterback. And again, it'll be the battle of the fourth down goers, as both coaches. The punters might as well stay home. 'Cause I don't think they're going.
Fourth and 3, there's no chance the punter's
unless
coming
they're going to
out.
ask them to throw the ball and have a few fakes out of the punt formation, but they're going to go for it almost all day long. And you hope that that doesn't come into it, that somebody does it in the wrong spot that we've seen. Campbell did it last year in the NFC Championship game, where he should probably have not gone for it a couple of times. And you know, that kind of changed the momentum of the game and kind of changed a few things. It's the same thing that Minnesota does every now and then. They do something like that, some trick play, some go for it in the wrong spot, and you change your own momentum, and it's not a good fit. So I think Detroit wins this game only if they can get those two guys going. They have a great offensive line. And again, that just sets up the rest of the world going there. And then their defense, again, they scheme very well. And I think they'll understand that Daniels is a threat running. They'll do something, whether it's a spy or however they'll handle it. But I think they'll handle it better than the team last week did, where they kind of backed off rushing him, which doesn't do you any good. You have to get some pressure on him. But again, I think they understand the assignment, and I think they'll go from there, and they'll probably win this game, especially being at home.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is having that Saturday night crowd, being at home. And I think one thing that, Joe, we've seen the Lions do throughout the year, and I know we didn't talk about the defense yet, but we talked about this on our show beforehand. They will really adjust to whatever Washington is going to want to do. And I think that's really one of the most important things to see this weekend. So
yeah,
both teams have that.
I think Dan Campbell takes the pressure off of the rest of the staff by being that guy, right? He's obviously the leader. He's outspoken. He has all these things. He does the decisions, but those guys are really good. And like we both have said, both of them might, if they win the Super Bowl this year, both of those coordinators are gone.
I think both those coordinators are gone anyway, honestly.
Well, I think they have a decision to make if they want to, depending on how it ends. Do they want to see it to the last step and win the Super Bowl and not kind of just jump ship for their own gain? Although Aaron Glenn's already been there once. I think it's a definite, though, is what I'm saying. If they win, then that whole staff is gone. But that's what happens. So.
Like
they'll all be back in 3.5 years. Looking for,
or I could say you could be like Philadelphia, lose the Super Bowl, and still lose both of your coordinators. It works that way too. So the Commanders already have 13 wins, 13 after beating the Bucs last weekend on a game-winning doink special field goal at the gun. The last time Washington won that many games, the red blank won the Super Bowl. Kids, ask your parents what those 5 blanks were that I just said. So the Commanders will win this one if Jaden Daniels. Now, we've said this on the show, but the Commanders will win this one if this game is close in the fourth quarter and Jaden Daniels has the ball. Because we've talked about Jaden Daniels all year pretty much. 70% of his passes, nearly 3,500 yards, a 25-9 touchdown to interception ratio, which is pretty good all by itself, being a rookie quarterback, being in a tough division, and really going for a franchise that was kind of supposed to be rebuilding this year, and they didn't really rebuild. They loaded, and then this run has happened. It's really been a good run at the beginning of the season, a good run at the end of the season, and since week 15, I know we didn't play in week 18, but since week 15, every one of the Commanders' wins have come down to the final seconds.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And if that happens, by the way, in those games, Daniels has had a quarterback rating of 99 or above, but it comes down to the final seconds. In any game this season, watch out. In the fourth quarter and overtime, Daniels has completed 72% of his passes at a 12-3 touchdown to interception ratio. No rookie quarterback in league history has had 12 fourth quarter or overtime touchdowns ever. Those heroics, by the way, 5 comeback wins, 8-3 in 7-point or less games this year. And I can just go through the resume right now. Week 2, Daniels led 2 fourth quarter scoring drives at that field goal fest against the Giants. 9 for 11, 91 yards in those 2 drives. And that was his first NFL win. In the Bengals game the week after, 9 for 10, 93 yards, a pair of scoring drives, and a beautiful 27-yard pass to Terry McLaurin at the end of that game. We all know about the Bears' Hail Mary game. 6 for 11 in the fourth quarter, completing his last 3 passes. You want more? I will give you more right now. Daniels, in the game against Eagles week 16, the second win of this streak, 9-yard go-ahead touchdown pass back to the end zone. That was his third touchdown pass in the fourth quarter. Daniels went 12 for 17, 139 yards, and 1 interception in the final 15 minutes. For any Jets quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers, that's a good game. Not just that. It just continues. Falcons, he had his first overtime game of his career. Oh, yeah, he went 5 for 5 in overtime, threw a game-winning pass again. And then came last week's game. Final drive, needed a field goal, and Joe, we said this. When he does that, you're like, yeah, this game is over. And you very rarely see that with a rookie. Completed all 3 passes, 44 yards, had a run for third down run, which basically set up a chip shot field goal, which almost wasn't a chip shot because apparently Zane Gonzalez was the most nervous kicker in the world. No Chris Boswell, is he, Jay? But after all of that, they got the field goal. So with that win, Jaden Daniels, first rookie quarterback to win a road playoff game since Russell Wilson in 2012. Russell Wilson didn't win his second game in 2012. Jaden Daniels can't do it on Saturday. And I think what we've seen is just a transcendent rookie quarterback who looks like a franchise guy for years to come as long as he can keep him healthy. And again, if Jared Goff has a bad game, and Jay already mentioned the 5 interception game that the Houston Texans did to him, a game that they won, by the way.
Yep.
In 10. This could be a last possession game, and very rarely do you say this. In that case, I like the road team. We'll see what happens. All right. The Eagles and Rams played a little game 2 months ago that was in LA, full of crazy Eagle fans, because, Rams never really a home team in LA. The Eagles won that game 37-20 on 255 yards rushing from Saquon Barkley. 255 yards. Jeez, now they play again. Now they play in Philly. Now definitely full of crazy Eagles fans. So hopefully this isn't a repeat from those Rams. The Philadelphia Eagles, after 2,005 yards rushing from Saquon Barkley in the regular season, got another 119 in a 22-10 wildcard win over Green Bay. 1 touchdown for Green Bay? 1 goddamn touchdown? Not 1 hit like it was in Major League. Anyway, Jalen Hurts barely got more than Saquon did. He only had 131 yards passing. With all of that said, Joe, Eagles will beat the Rams Sunday if.
The Eagles will beat the Rams on Sunday if they duplicate what they did when I was there a month ago. That was the first half wasn't all that obvious that they couldn't stop anybody. Barkley, actually, I think I texted one of you two guys that he had hurt himself somewhere, and he had to change his shoes out towards the end of the half, and
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of
remember
weird.
that.
I think it was you.
It
Um,
was.
it was weird because they sent somebody to the locker room to get a new pair of shoes for him, and they brought him out to him, and he's standing there on the sideline and there was 45 seconds to go in the half, and he's like, "What do you want me to do with these now?" I'll go in the locker room in a minute. I'll change them when I get in. And he pulled up last week a little bit lame also on a couple of plays, and so we'll see how healthy he can stay. Obviously, he looked good at the end of the game when they needed him to be, which is what his forte is this year and has been all season long, is the fourth quarter. And that's what they use him for when they get a lead. That's all you're going to see. Because we all know, yeah, he's like Barry Sanders. He's going to lose yardage here and there on some runs, but he's also going to break something, and then he's off to the races and nobody can catch him. So, and then of course the first play of the second half, he ran 80 yards for a touchdown or 70 yards, whatever it was, for a touchdown. So that kind of just broke their backs. And that was a Ram team that just wasn't, the defense was just not playing well at that point. They had also didn't have their wide receivers. They were a little bit down at that moment when they played Philadelphia last time. But as you kind of talk about it, you say, okay, you played them a month ago and you got beat by their strength. So what can you do to change that at this point? So again, you have to stop Barkley, but more importantly, you got to keep Hurts from running against you. And you can't play both those guys on the run. You have to make him throw the ball. And he wasn't very good last week. He was 6 for 9 in the first half or some ridiculous thing. Um, they actually looked pretty bad last week. Even though they started to come on a little bit in the second half and look a little bit better. Their offense is just struggling at this point. And I think if you can figure out a way to keep him in the pocket, but you have to put a little pressure on him, not like not like last week where he stood around and he could have read a book while he was waiting for guys to get open. He did.
And
That was
AJ
the
Brown could have
problem.
read that book
Yeah,
also.
that was the problem with the way they played him. So you do need to have somebody on him. You need to have a spy on him. You need to have a late rush on him to make him throw the ball. But you have to make sure that you let him beat you. You can't just let them run all day long because again, Barkley's not the only running they have back, and they have Hurts who can run the ball. Plus, they got a couple of other guys in there that they give it to every now and then that'll beat you up too. So again, I think you made the comment last week to me, Rabbi. The offensive line really didn't lose much when Kelsey retired. They look like they picked up, and they're still just as good as they were. So that's the whole key to this game: is can that Ram defense adjust to what they saw? Because Philly's not changing anything. Philly doesn't have anything to change to. This is what they do, and they're not going to make any adjustment that's going to change the game because they're not going to put the ball more in Jalen Hurts' hands. That's not a plan of success. So I think you're going to have to figure that out. Um, but I think the Rams, again, if they can duplicate what they did in the running game against that very young Rams defense, that if they start to get run over a little bit, might not finish the game and might be interesting to see how we go.
It's funny watching that Packers Eagles game. That first touchdown from Hurts last week, like you said, could have read a book. Hurts was allowed to, and this is literally probably one of only Hurts' like 5 good throws in the entire game. But he could go through about 7 different progressions on that one play, and he got it to Dotson, who hadn't had a touchdown the whole year for the Eagles. And that team looked as good in terms of just protecting Hurts as much as they possibly could. Unfortunately, though, Hurts couldn't receive the favor, and that's why I'm going to talk about my point right now. We started the show talking about a 10-7 regular season team, 4 seed in the AFC, who exceeded expectations with a blowout win last week, and now after a 27-9 win over the Minnesota Vikings on Monday, the Los Angeles Rams qualify in the NFC with that same description. So the Rams will get to the NFC Championship if they force Jalen Hurts to be a thrower. Yes, it's pretty simple as that for me because he had the injury in week 17. They sat him kind of precautionary, knew they were the 2 seed if they had beaten the Cowboys, which they did. in week 17, so they didn't have to play him in week 18, and it was a smart move not to play him in week 18. They played nobody. And this is what you got from him last week. Not a lot. 13 of 21 for 130 yards and 2 touchdown strikes. But again, I mentioned the first one was literally with a lot of time and having a very short field. Not a significant threat through the air really last week at all. And you're going to need to do that to just be a Super Bowl contender. But if you're going to go up against a team like the Rams, who's always going to hit on all cylinders with Stafford, Kupp, Nakua, Kyron Williams having good running games, you're not going to be able to match points with them. Green Bay just had no bodies last week at the end of that game. And it's not saying that Jalen Hurts isn't a good quarterback, but in the 2-2 start that they had earlier this year, remember they started the season 2-2, Jalen Hurts was averaging 37 pass attempts a game. And then Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni said, let's not do that anymore. And then he just averaged 22 pass attempts a game after that. You don't do that with the franchise quarterback, especially one that was pretty much the number 2 choice for MVP just 2 years ago, by the way. And now it's like, can we trust Jalen Hurts when the game is on the line? Might be a good quarterback, but he's not throwing like one right now. I will talk about the Rams and not just bash Jalen Hurts the whole entire time. So here we go. The Rams had Sam Darnold last week, and God, it was almost like they just took what the Lions did, got into the Lions' bodies, did the same thing. The Rams sacked Sam Darnold, an NFL playoff record, 9 times, tying that record in that win last week. Sacked 5 times before halftime. And then the backbreaker was the Kobe Durant picking up a pass intended for Jordan Addison that basically gave the Rams another touchdown going into the break. Now, Darnold went 25 for 40 for 245, but lost 82 yards on those 9 sacks, and most of the Vikings' 206 total yards. The game was already out of hand. Now, quarterback pressure rate for the Rams is pretty good. It's number 10 of the league. They have a 35.6% pressure rate, and that's pretty good because that means you're going to be able to rush Jalen Hurts, and he's going to make a mistake if you keep doing that. Now, not great overall this whole entire year. They were 26th overall in yards allowed, 22nd against the run, 20th against the pass. But in the 7-game run that the Rams have had to end the season, where they pretty much played their best, the Rams have only allowed 104 rushing yards per game. It was 130 for the entire season. Pass has pretty much been the same, 222 per game, and they allowed 223. What the Rams had to do in the post-Aaron Donald era, and I know he played a season after, or a season or two after the Super Bowl, but essentially when they won the Super Bowl, it's time that kind of burned down. As their owner, Les Snead, as their general manager, Les Snead once said, F them picks in order to get themselves building up again. And they had to build up again. Now they have Jared Verse, who's probably the defensive rookie of the year this year. So they've done a decent job building up on that defense. Now's the real test on Sunday. They have a wounded quarterback that they're playing. Let's just not kid ourselves. This is a wounded quarterback. And if they are able to take the target, Joe, and kind of knock him down, Jalen Hurts can be immortal and can be the reason why the Philadelphia Eagles lose this game.
Indeed.
All right, so
I do have a major announcement before I sign off here. My friend who's on the Rams chain crew was by last night to have a drink and a cigar.
Ooh.
And they announced yesterday that they've given a raise to the guys on the chain crew.
Nice.
They were making $16 an hour. They are now making $16.50.
Nice. At least a 50-cent raise is more than nothing, I would have to say.
Drinks are on him next time, right, Joe?
What's that?
Drinks are on him next time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
only if it's happy hour.
And they're the only people that they didn't fly to Arizona for the playoff game.
Oh, Jesus. Are you
Families,
kidding me?
kids, cheerleaders, everybody else they took, they told those guys, stay home.
That's
God.
just rude.
I hope they paid those Arizona guys $16.50
Exactly.
when they went on there. Anyway, thank you, Joe Tufaro, for joining us again tonight. He joins me on Mondays for the Official Review Podcast. Part NFL
Joseph,
Recap.
always a pleasure.
We'll see you
The
guys
Official
soon.
Review Podcast is part NFL Recap, part officiated questions and stuff. So join us for that. And Joe, thanks for joining us tonight. I'll talk to you on.
See you guys.
All right, take care.
All right, let's finish tonight with some college football. The College Football Playoff National Championship going on in Atlanta, in the heart of SEC country, is between two Midwestern stalwart teams in Notre Dame and Ohio State. It just means more. The 7th and 8th seeds in this CFP bracket haven't played like it, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a replay of their 17-14 game from September 23rd of 2023, which included the last-second Buckeye touchdown in South Bend, and the Irish only had 10 minutes. Whoopsie. Ohio State got here by beating Tennessee at round 1, 42-17, demolishing Oregon in the Rose Bowl quarterfinal, 41-21, and nipping out Texas 28-14 in a hostile Cotton Bowl semifinal. That's an SEC sandwich with some Big Ten meat in the middle. Now, could the team that looked like dead man walking after a November 30th loss to Michigan break out with the first title of the 12-team CFP era, just like the Buckeyes had the first title of the 4-team CFP era a decade ago? Now, Notre Dame, by the way, had a little bit of a closer road to Indiana. They won 27-17 against Indiana at home in CFP round 1, 23-10 over Georgia in the quarters of the Sugar Bowl, and edging out Penn State in the semifinal at the Orange Bowl, 27-24. A Big Ten sandwich with some SEC meat in the middle. Yum. Now let's see if Notre Dame can get the job done, or if the drought will go on for a 36th year for a national title, and that'll make it Die Hard night in 2025. Free admission next time for the people who last saw Notre Dame win a championship. Loved Major League. Anyway, Anthony, you have the Star Watch for both sides. Give me who you got.
Well, I'm going to pick for Ohio State the guy you mentioned last week. And by the way, kudos to you for picking him out. Jack Sawyer finished the Cotton Bowl against Texas with 3 combined tackles, one solo, 1 sack, 1 fumble recovery. Oh, by the way, that was on the same play, by the way, on 4th and 1, sacking Quinn Ewers and the strip sack, the fumble, and taking it back 83 yards for pretty much the touchdown that sealed the game, put it away, and a defining moment for a guy who came back for his senior seasons in order to win a championship. And now he's 1 game away, and what is going to be his final 60 minutes has a Buckeye with a chance to win a national championship. But he's also playing his best stretch of football, too. In the last 4 games, that's including the 3 college football playoff games that Ohio State's been involved in. He's had 4.5 sacks, 10 tackles, an interception, and of course, said forced fumble return for a touchdown. And he's also part of a defensive line that has combined, so as my stats line up, combined for close to 40 sacks this season. So it's going to 30.5 sacks and was 40.5 tackles for loss. When you're throwing also Tony Williams and JT Tulamalo, I gotta pronounce it.
Tulamalo,
yes. When you combine those 3, so it's gonna be a huge challenge for Notre Dame. When you think about that defensive line, Ohio State obviously being the top defense in football, Jack Sawyer looking to cap off his college career with a national championship, and a guy who was giving his all for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And for Notre Dame is the quarterback Riley Leonard, and it's been a tale of 2 Riley Leonards. His amazing regular season, one of the few quarterbacks to throw for over 2,700 yards and run for 700 yards in his own right, leading a prominent Notre Dame run game, but also an offense that is sometimes like 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yep.
When you think about the passing game. Now, he had an uneven game against Penn State. He was 15-23, 223, a rushing touchdown, and a big 54-yard touchdown pass to Jalen Greenhouse in that game. He also threw 2 interceptions, one that set up a field goal, that led to a field goal, and the other that led to a touchdown. And also got knocked out of the game too with concussion-like syndromes before coming back in the second half. And it's going to be a question of which one shows up. Is it the guy who was so phenomenal in the regular season, has it after the transfer from Duke, or is it going to be the guy who was just 6-9 in the first half, 6 of 11, 63 yards in the first half of that game? So it's just going to be which quarterback shows up. And for Notre Dame, in order to win this football game, where you know you have a team with a stout defensive line like Ohio State that can actually stop the run and get after the quarterback without having to send extra guys, it puts more on the quarterback to be able to connect down the field and to be able to get the ball downfield to the receivers. It's going to be interesting to see just how much is Leonard able to do that with his legs, but more importantly, if he's able to do that with his arm, because for Notre Dame to have any chance of not getting routed the way the Oregon Ducks was routed in the Rose Bowl a couple of weeks ago, they're going to have to find some kind of passing game, and they can't wait around for the second half and a quarterback coming back from a near concussion-like hit to get it done. So they're going to have to figure it out immediately. Otherwise, we could be looking at a one-sided national championship game before we know it.
The one thing that's interesting about that game against Texas is how much Ohio State had to go to plan B, C, and D in that game, and it really didn't show, like the final score didn't show what the game was, which was pretty much a back and forth kind of muck fest. And I don't think you're gonna see that on Monday. First of all, because it's not outside, it's inside, and also, but I just think that both teams should score more than 20 in this game, and if that's the case, then we might have a fun game. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all by the way, I think it was like 28 combined points between Penn State and Notre Dame in that fourth quarter. Because the first 3 quarters, if you DVR'd it, you probably fast forward and got to the fourth quarter where all the fun started.
Funny though, when you get to the 28-point portion of the game, you realize that both teams made a lot of mistakes, and the worst throws for Drew Aller in that game, and even Riley Leonard were right there. Jay, I want you to make up the echoes. Don't have to dot the I. I won't make you do that. But give me a stat watch on either side.
You don't dot that I.
No, I can see you not dotting that I since you're wearing the Michigan National Championship shirt.
I only have so many hours left to wear it. For the Ohio State Buckeyes, the numbers is 313. And no, that is not the Columbus area code. That is the numbers that show the lack of production by freshman sensation Jeremiah Smith in the Buckeyes passing game against Texas. That would be 3 targets, 1 catch, 3 yards. Now, I've spent the last 2 shows where we've previewed CFP games talking about how Ohio State needs to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers, especially in the passing game, and especially to their very talented group of wide receivers, starting with freshman sensation Jeremiah Smith. His regular season level of production, 57 catches, 934 yards, 16.4 average, 10 touchdowns, not only carried over in the wins over Tennessee and Oregon, but the case could be made that he took it to the next level. He totaled 13 catches for 290 yards, that's 22.3 a catch, 4 touchdowns, and he was pretty much uncoverable. The question was, could he maintain that level of production against one of the best pass defenses in the nation? The answer was, not so much. Senior defensive back Jahadi Barron, the Jim Thorpe Award winner for best defensive back, and the rest of his compatriots held Smith to a single catch in the first quarter for a measly 3 yards, and that was that with that. Texas decided to force Ohio State to beat them with anyone other than Smith, as evidenced by bracketing him with double coverage all night. It proved very effective when the Buckeyes tried to force the ball to Smith to get arguably their best playmaker more involved in the offense, because it resulted in an interception by Longhorn linebacker David Gabenda on the opening drive of the second half. This forced the other playmakers to step up, and luckily for the Buckeyes, they have a few of them, especially at the wide receiver position. Sophomore wide receiver Carnell Tate, who had been missing in action in the win over Tennessee and Oregon, 1 catch for 18 yards against the Vols, 1 reception for 10 yards against the Ducks, had 7 catches for 87 yards, 12.4 a catch. And senior wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, third straight game with at least 5 catches and at least 50 yards. Even the running backs and the tight ends chipped in. Quinshon Judkins, 3 catches, 22 yards. His backfield mate, Travion Henderson, turned a screen pass into a 75-yard touchdown, the longest play of the game. Even tight end G. Scott, 5 catches, 30 yards. This allowed quarterback Will Howard to spread the ball around and keep the Buckeyes' high-powered offense humming. Texas wanted to force Ohio State to beat them with anyone other than Smith, and the Buckeyes did just that. I'm just not sure that formula will work against Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish have a lockdown pass defense of their own, number 1 in pass efficiency defense over the last 2 seasons, including in their CFP wins over Indiana, Georgia, and Penn State. Notre Dame is number 1 in the nation in completion percentage allowed at barely over 50% and second in the nation in passing yards allowed per game at just 165.3. Freshman cornerback Leonard Moore, 10 passes defense, 2 picks. Senior All-American safety Xavier Watts, 6 picks, including a pick 6, led the way. Texas went heavy in zone coverage and tried to bait Howard into some bad throws to keep Smith in check. The question is whether Irish defensive coordinator Al Golden will look to duplicate that game plan or stick to the heavy man coverage scheme he's run all season, despite the loss of Benjamin Morrison, their best cornerback. The Irish played man-to-man 57.6% of the time, second most in the nation. Ohio State needs to get more than 3 targets, 1 catch, and 3 yards from arguably their best playmaker if they're going to beat Notre Dame. It'll be on Buckeyes offensive coordinator Chip Kelly to scheme ways to get Smith the ball early and often, no matter what coverage looks the Irish throw at them. The Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith pitch and catch connection has destroyed man coverage all season long. So if Notre Dame sticks with that as their primary coverage look, it'll be a battle of strength on strength. Whomever wins that battle likely goes home with the national championship. Now, for the Fighting Irish, again, I'm going to look at lack of production. In this case, it's by Jeremiah Love in the Irish's running game against Penn State. In my scouts for Notre Dame for our last 2 shows where we've previewed CFP games, I focused on Riley Leonard needing to give the Irish a true dual threat quarterback performance so that opponents like Penn State, whose number 8 ranked run defense, allowing just a little under 101 yards per game, couldn't load up and sell out to stop the Irish's vaunted rushing attack, which is 11th in the nation at 217.5 yards per game and 3rd in the nation at 6.1 yards per carry during the regular season, and dare the Irish quarterback to beat them with his arm, as Anthony referenced. And what do you know? Between Leonard and his backup, Stephen Angeli, who stepped in while Leonard dealt with the first-half head injury and led the Irish on a field goal drive after they fell behind 10-0, their first double-digit deficit of the season, the Irish actually won by racking up more yards through the air, 267, than on the ground, 117. Yeah, that's right. They were 117 yards below their average. The 117 against Penn State is only the 3rd time all season, regular and CFP, where they've been held to less than 150 yards rushing. 8 times this season, Notre Dame has topped 200 yards on the ground with a high mark of 362 in a 66-7 win in Week 3 over fellow Hoosier State School Purdue. They won 5 straight games from Week 8 through Week 12 with over 200 yards on the ground. Now, running back Jeremiah Love is Notre Dame's leading rusher, 1,122 yards on 159 carries. That's 7.1 every time he touches the ball, and 17 TDs on the ground. And they count on him to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But after putting up 108 yards on 8 carries, a whopping 13.5-yard average in the win over Indiana, including that 98-yard touchdown run in the first quarter, which set the tone, Love was pretty much MIA in the win over Georgia. 6 carries, a measly 19 yards at 3.2 yards a carry. And simply okay in the win over Penn State. 11 carries for 46 yards. Yeah, it's 4.2 a pop. He did have a touchdown on what is arguably the sickest 2-yard touchdown run I've ever seen. Yes, he re-aggravated a knee injury he sustained in the regular season finale against USC, but he was supposedly healthy for the Orange Bowl. 17 carries for 65 yards, 3.8 a pop is very unlove-like, and I can't see the Irish beating the Buckeyes, who including the CFP, have allowed just 88.9 yards per game rushing, number 3 in the nation, and just 2.7 yards per carry, number 2 in the nation. Those totals for Love are his combined across the last 2 games. if one of the best running backs in the nation is not a major factor. Love has been more feast or famine this season than I'd like to see from my number one running back, including the CFP. Love has been held to 50 yards or less on the ground 5 times, and in 4 of those 5, he was held to less than 4 yards a carry. But he's also had 5 games where he had 100 yards or more on the ground, and in each of those games, he's averaged at least 8.5 yards per carry, including 3 where he averaged more than 10. Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman often says his team is offensive line driven, which basically means his offensive philosophy is, I'm going to ram the ball down your throat with my running game, even if you know it's coming. So go ahead, sell out and try to stop it. I fully expect the Irish to lean heavily into their running game, especially with the impact that Leonard brings, forcing defenses to account for him on design runs as well as scrambles, especially in the red zone. But in order for their running game to be the beast it was during the regular season, they'll need Jeremiah Love to give them a performance closer to the 16 carries for 137 yards, 8.6 a pop, and 2 rushing touchdowns he had in Notre Dame's 35-14 Week 10 win over Virginia. If he's held to anything closer to what he's done the last 2 games, that's not going to be enough for them to beat the Buckeyes.
It's funny, if you take out the 98-yard run, and you've had runs this year, 68, 76, 64, 48, 39, and 29, the only average, his longest run in any of those next things outside 98 was 9 yards. And there's only been 2 games this entire season where he has had his long run of the game being in single digits. By the way, you know what 313 area code is?
What?
It's Detroit. So obviously Columbus would not like it
I did not know that. I cannot say I was trying to invoke the Wolverines.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious, though. I was like,
I will invoke the school up north more when you do your rant in the next segment.
We'll talk about that in just a moment. But so I'm going to hit you with the X Factor, just like X Factor said back in 2001 in the WWE. So my names are Travion Henderson is my name for Ohio State. Now, all of the stuff that the Ohio State Buckeyes do at wide receiver, the running game is probably, if it outrushes Notre Dame on Monday with Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, Ohio State goes home with the natty. But Henderson is my key because of the fact that he is a home run threat anywhere across the field. Now, last year he had tons of 100-yard games. He had none this season. However, big play of the Cotton Bowl was his 75-yard receiving touchdown. And it was funny because that's a play where everybody is expecting a big play down the field, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, let's just dink it over to Henderson and he can run the 75 yards, which he did. And he is going to be an NFL draftee, just like Judkins. In the 15 games that they've played thus far this year, Henderson has had 967 yards and 10 touchdowns. Last year against Notre Dame in that game that I referenced before in September, 104 yards and a touchdown. Now, he has 27 catches as well, so he can be another option out of the backfield. I think you're going to see most of the heavy lifting on the running game being from Quinshon Judkins, but what I've seen this year from Henderson is just continuing to get into his role, and is a guy who is kind of like the David Montgomery of, you might have your own Sonic and Knuckles here in the backfield for Ohio State, because if that does better than Notre Dame on Monday, the national title goes to Ohio State. That's why Quinshon Judkins is not the player to watch as Travion Henderson, and that's going to be a very interesting matchup, because I think we all, again, focus on that passing game, but that running game just as deadly for Ohio State. On the other side of the ball, you have the defense of Notre Dame, and you have Christian Gray, who was the defensive MVP of the Orange Bowl. He had the INT in the last minute of the game, given it was a terrible pass from Drew Aller, to help seal the victory and put Notre Dame in field goal position. The sophomore has made an impact on this team in his first 2 seasons. And unfortunately, we hate to invoke the memories, but one of his biggest plays this season was the 100-yard interception return for a touchdown that basically sealed the win over USC. Now, this is a guy who very, very scouted by SEC schools, but he ended up going to Notre Dame. Got a 70.6 PFF score in that game. Usually 60 is the average, so he was a little bit ahead of it. It's the nation's #1 pass efficiency defense this season. Gray has had 30 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 3 INTs, but no 50 Shades of Gray, obviously, in this game itself. So, what Notre Dame just needs to do is just continue to go for the big play themselves, because if Ohio State makes any mistakes, and Will Howard has been fairly accurate this year, but this is the CFP National Championship game. Notre Dame is going to be a touchdown underdog in this game. In fact, they're probably going to be closer to double-digit underdogs in this game just because of how good Ohio State has been in this tournament. I'm very interested to see what the secondary can do against Ohio State. Will they force Ohio State to have to try to be a little more two-dimensional, or will Ohio State kind of do exactly what they did against Tennessee and Oregon? Get to a big lead early and never look back. And if they do that, not going to be good. But Notre Dame can make this a little mucky. And if they can, it's going to be because of their secondary. All right. So we finish up tonight very, very simply with this. Excuse me for having an opinion, pal. I'm about to give you a rant. Don't it always seem to go, but you don't know what you got till it's gone. That's the words of the Counting Crows. That's the words of the Counting Crows and some woman named Joni Mitchell. I wonder what she's doing now. Anyway, the fans of Notre Dame and Ohio State wanted to just recently take the 2 coaches of Monday's Natty, paid their paradise and jobs, and put up a parking lot vacancy as coach. Yeah, they would have been sent down.
You're stretching it a little bit, but I appreciate the musical reference.
Yeah, they would have also been sent down in a big yellow taxi / Uber. For Notre Dame, when Marcus Freeman was hired in 2021 to replace Brian Kelly, who left to join his family to take over LSU, the then 36-year-old was mobbed by all of his players. Watch the video; it's really cool. Sure, he was kind of inexperienced, but he would take care of the program. Well, he lost in the Fiesta Bowl versus Oklahoma State that year, and then lost to Ohio State the very next season to start, then lost the very next week to Marshall. Starting your career 0-3 had never happened for any Irish coach, and starting 0-3 with a loss against Marshall to end it, forgivable, don't you think? Here's a tweet from Barstool Sports after that day. Brian Kelly went from Notre Dame to LSU, and somehow it killed both programs. That's impressive. Now let's go into time a little bit later. Freeman did end up 8-4 that season, but that was a team that was in the Fiesta Bowl, and they ended up at the Gator Bowl. Not good. The next year, another 3 losses, losing again to Ohio State, Clemson, and Louisville. Sure, 9-3 is better, but they went to the Sun Bowl. The Irish and the Sun Bowl. Not synonymous in my book in any way, shape, or form. But the piece de resistance happened in week 2 of this year. Sure, anyone can beat Texas A&M on the road, and that's impressive. But what about a loss at home to Northern Illinois? Yes, a 29.5-point favorite going down. That doesn't help your cash, eh? Back to the criticism. This is Pete Sampson of The Athletic after that day. It will take Freeman a long time to come back from Saturday because defeat cuts deeper than losing the benefit of the doubt. And at this point, those reserves have been exhausted. Well, apparently, Freeman went back into the reserves and nothing has been exhausted. 13 wins in a row leader, Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman is 1 win away from being the first coach since Lou Holtz to win a title for the Irish. Lou Holtz. That's a funny name. Keep that in mind. You'll hear that name in a second as I talk about Ryan Day. When Ryan Day took over for Urban Meyer in 2019, he coached 3 games in 2018, by the way, as well. That was his first full season in 2019, ended the same way those 3 games did in 2018 did, without defeat. His first ever loss as a coach came in a kind of important spot as he lost to Clemson in the national semifinal in 2019. The big games, by the way, seem to be a big issue for Ryan Day, and it showed. Day finished the 2020 COVID season undefeated, 6-0, but it's still undefeated. He beat Clemson this time in the semifinal, but then 42-24, he lost the national title kind of handily to Alabama. And then, after losing to Oregon to start 2021, came the real resume killer. Here are some of the losses to Michigan. Get ready to smile, Jay. We've been bagging on your teams enough tonight. 2021, first loss to Michigan in 10 years, 42-27. 2022, loses to Michigan at home, 45-23. Outscored 28-3 in the second half. And no, Falcons, I'm not making fun of you. It just was 28-3 in the second half. Sorry, Atlanta. This allowed legendary coach Lou Holtz to say this on the Pat McAfee show before his Irish faced Ohio State in 2023. Not going to do my Lou Holtz impression. Everyone who beats them does so because we're more physical than Ohio State. I think Notre Dame will take that same approach. As we mentioned, the Irish did lose that game, and Ohio State won 17-14. And it forced Ryan to call out Lou Holtz. Yeah, baby. A 45-year-old man calling someone out almost double his age. That's a big man right there. They might have gotten the best of his Irish demons that day. But they would lose yet again, 30-24 to Michigan, and they would have no chance to revenge that in a CFP game. They did the year before when they lost to Georgia, and they kind of got their tail whipped against Missouri. 2024 was supposed to be different. They had a $20 million team, and they were pretty much the kings of NIL. They had the team money could buy. But they lost another close game to Oregon in October. Then the game that might have gotten all of the Twitter X creatures out of the cave, 13-10 loss to Michigan. Here are some of the things I saw on the message boards after that game. Ashamed to be a Buckeye. The 90s have returned. That's a reference to Ohio State coach John Cooper and his 2-10-1 record against Michigan. It has to be Vrabel. It's always been Vrabel. That was a possible Ryan Day replacement. Mike Vrabel is now a replacement. He's just with the Patriots. Sorry, Ohio State. Chip and Dale got out-coached. This is a reference to Ohio State coordinator Chip Kelly, by the way, too. What a difference 3 games win. The makeup win over Oregon, Tennessee game, the Texas game. Now, if people said that only a national title game could save the job of Ryan Day at Ohio State, consider him safe. For the too young to be good, Marcus Freeman, and the too brash to be good, Ryan Day, along with his Dr. Frankenstein of offense, Chip Kelly, the 12-team college football playoff allows these narratives to be rewritten. A 4-team playoff, neither team ends up making it. At least Day is on the unemployment line right now, at least in December. Glad to see these two get a true second chance with this CFP. By the way, I'll be saving this rant for a year from now when these two other also ran coaches get here again. I can just plug in the names and put everything in as we go into 2025. Guys, final thoughts.
Anthony, go ahead. I'll wrap this up.
I think it's you got the 2 coaches, Marcus Freeman. By the way, former Ohio State Buckeye who is coaching against his
grad assistant. Yep.
He also played linebacker.
Yes, he does.
And this has to be said, the first African American head coach that would be going for a national championship game, almost was the King Day, no less. But when you look at Marcus Freeman and you look at Ryan Day, the teams has kind of taken on the personalities and kind of the resiliency behind the 2 head coaches. You think about Notre Dame bounced back from a bad loss. And yeah, they look. You play who you have to play who you play that's in front of you. They didn't have the most glamorous of schedules. I know a lot of people made that argument when it came down to the college football playoff field as far as the teams. But you know what? Notre Dame, they got in, they took care of business and against a cross-state rival Indiana. And they took care of 2 very quality opponents in back-to-back weeks. In Georgia, the 2-time defending national champions from a couple years ago, and Penn State Nittany Lions team that was just as good. So they have definitely kind of silenced the critics as far as the level of competition that they have taken on this year, because they're here, there's a strong defense, even with a shaky passing game at times. This is what they are, but it's been the coaching of Freeman. And obviously the video when he was mobbed, the players love him. And that's obviously when you over in most locker rooms to get he got the players on his side. And to see Notre Dame, the program, rise back to kind of national to a national level of relevancy, it's always been a good day for college football. And by the way, they are independent, so they get all the money. They don't have to share with anybody. So that's always been a boon as well. But Ryan Day, I mean, a month ago, we were talking about this guy is one loss away from losing his job possibly after everything that happened. Again, losing to Michigan and going to a college football playoff. Well, a lot of people didn't put much faith into him, but here they are. And obviously, the most impressive of that role was going into the Rose Bowl and.
Whoa! Did we just lose Anthony?
I think we just did lose Anthony. Jay, while you're here, we can kind of talk about it now since we're all here. What have you seen this season that's kind of impressed you with?
I'm gonna take a little bit of a different tack here, because when you told me when we were putting the show together, this is kind of the rant that you had kind of dialed up and were ready to fire on. And there you are. You good, man?
Yeah, I'm good. That was weird.
Wrap your stuff up.
Wrap your stuff up before we get to Jay.
Yeah, pretty much. What Ryan Day was able to do. Both of these coaches has done a great job of kind of keeping the players focused from the outside noise and keeping it on the biggest prize. And both coaches are now 60 minutes away from achieving that goal. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what the hell happened. I just ended up getting kicked out.
No worries. Rabbi, as I was saying to you while Anthony was temporarily experiencing some technical difficulties, when you told me when we were putting the show together that this was the rant that you had dialed up, I was kind of wondering how I would, without knowing the full context, where you were going to take this. And I love the way you went with it, the full journey. I read a piece today by Austin Meek, who covers University of Michigan football and basketball for The Athletic, about who Wolverine fans are or should be rooting for on Monday night when Notre Dame takes on Ohio State for college football's national championship, as Big Blue Nation hates both schools. Do we root for the Irish because there's no universe in all of the multiverse where we'd ever want the Buckeyes to be national champs, or do we root for Ohio State because they're a Big Ten school? And as legendary Wolverine coach Bo Schembechler said way back in the day, quote, "To hell with Notre Dame," which had me thinking about how do you look at this? I'll start in South Bend. It's kind of funny how Marcus Freeman has made the Fighting Irish likable over the course of his tenure in the shadow of Touchdown Jesus and the Golden Dome, partially due to what he's built in his short time as head coach and how he's carried himself as the face of the football program. As Anthony said, his players absolutely love him, and he's expertly walked the line between respecting the school's history and traditions while adapting to college football's new world order to keep Notre Dame football nationally relevant. And it's also partially due to just how hated his predecessor, Brian Kelly, is after he left for what he felt would be greener national championship opportunity pastures at LSU. Now, former Irish quarterback Brady Quinn, now a college football analyst for Fox Sports, believed that the reason Notre Dame is so likable right now is simple. 2 words: Marcus Freeman. Full stop. Then there's Ryan Day. Does any head coach of a big-time college football program get any more insane hate than Ryan Day does? I gave ESPN college football broadcaster and former Buckeyes quarterback Kirk Herbstreit some crap on our last show for some of his takes on the inclusion of certain teams in the CFP at the expense of certain others. But I agree with him when he starts talking about the lunatic fringe part of the Buckeyes fan base, which overall is the largest in the nation with 11.26 million fans, according to a 2022 study conducted by strategy consultant TJ Altomar using New York Times data. They absolutely lose their minds, this lunatic fringe does, over Day's losses, especially 4 straight to that school up north. They and even some of the normal Buckeye fans were ready to run him out of Columbus on a rail after loss number 4, even though they still had the CFP to play. And now that he's reached the national title game behind 3 emphatic wins, they love him again. Talk about whiplash. And yet there are still Buckeye fans who refuse to give him any credit for the team's success, but lay all of the blame for all of their losses squarely at his feet. And I'm not just talking about the ones to Michigan. Both of these coaches have shown that they are among the best in the game at what they do, leading their teams to this title game. And anyone who counted them out at the end of the regular season as we headed into this bracket either hasn't done their research on what they've accomplished with their teams this season, or is just a lunatic fringe level hater, plain and simple. As a Michigan fan, I can't rightly root for either one of them, but I think I'll hate it just a wee bit less if the Irish are the team hoisting the trophy on Monday night.
Well, considering the Michigan garb, I think that's probably it's funny because of the fact that they don't play each other anymore. People don't realize how much
they
that.
Won't, though they are going to start
really
that rivalry back up in 2033. It's already in motion.
2033, great. That's for a group for people that haven't played for who played almost every year from every year. Now it's still another 7 years. Amazing.
Yep. Go figure.
Gotta love realignment. Anyway, for the great commentary tonight of Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, along with Joe Tufaro, who we heard from earlier, I am the guy who people have said has the commentary styles of Dennis Miller circa Monday Night Football 2000, and I heard that is not a compliment.
No, it's not.
This is on the Sports Lines. YouTube.com/on the Sports Lines on demand, and on Facebook at Facebook.com/on the Sports Lines. If you watch this live tonight, thank you. And Jay, you got some stuff for access.
Yeah, our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sports Lines, where you'll find a link to each new show, like tonight's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, I've posted 2 links. The first is a story by Jeff Howe, who's the national NFL insider for The Athletic, on how the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty has not only secured the legacies of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, but has also wreaked havoc on all the other Super Bowl contenders who have been trying to figure out how to finally get past them. The second is a piece by Will Salmon, the Mets beat writer for The Athletic, on Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker, the legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster who spent 53 years calling Brewers games, among other things. Uecker passed away today at age 90, and our national pastime has been lessened by his loss. Both are excellent reads and worth your time to check out.
By the way, I did not realize this, but Bob Uecker, his career average is 200.
On the nose.
Let me remind you, it's 200 on the nose. So
thank you, Pedro.
The Mendoza line for Mendoza is 215. So you know what? Let's rename the Mendoza line the Uecker line. One of my Mark Renee, a person who does stuff.
I will co-sign that. I will co-sign that.
Let's rename the Mendoza line the Uecker line. We'll see you next week for our championship edition of On the Sports Lines, our conference championship edition, and then we'll have national champions. So until that, see you in 7 days, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.